Elaine Pulakos, welcome to the conversation today.
John, thank you so much for having me on your show.
It is a pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from the DC area. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about how generative AI could help enable skills-based hiring. AI and deep machine learning, it's all the rage. Everyone's talking about it. Just last night, I think there was some really cool new announcements from OpenAI. It seems like every day, almost every week, certainly every week, almost every day, there's some new announcement, some new cool thing, some new tool. And I think it's really fun from the HR and people management space to really think about how these various tools can really help us do the work of HR and human capital leadership better. So that's really what we're going to be exploring together today. As we get started, I wanted to share Elaine's bio with everybody. Elaine Pulakos is CEO of PDRI by Pearson and an expert in building organizational and team capabilities that translate into business growth. She is well known for her research on talent and performance management practices and has extensive global experience helping companies build these capabilities to increase their competitive advantage. And I should add, I should have referred to you this way at the beginning, but you are Dr. Elaine Pulakos. You have your Ph.D. and clearly a tremendous both practitioner-based and research-based background. Now, Elaine, anything you would like to add by way of your background or personal context before we dive on it?
Maybe just a little bit about PDRI. It's a company that I've been the CEO of for quite a few years now, but it's actually nearly a 50-year-old company. Now, of course, I'm not 50 years old, right? But anyway, the company actually specializes in assessment solutions that are based on rigorous scientific research. And I mention that because we're going to be talking about AI today. And one of the things that we did this year, actually we started it last year, was to launch an AI research program to make sure that our applications of GenAI were done in a responsible way where we really understand what's going on and we work to make sure that the assessments we're developing are fair and that they actually work effectively to predict job performance. Because AI is one of these things, garbage in, garbage out, right? So,
Right.
and not a lot of research has been done to actually make sure that what's coming out is going to be fair and effective for use in hiring. So we wanted to take some extra steps to really do a lot of research around this before we launched it into production, launch these tools into production to actually support our assessment development. But we work with a lot of large private companies, especially some of the world's largest tech companies, but we also support the Office of Personnel Management to provide assessment services to the entire federal government. So just a little by way of my background to kind of let people know how much we've been into assessment for how long and some of the things that we're starting now with this whole AI revolution. But anyway, let me let you get to your questions.
Yeah, no, thank you for that background. And I agree. It's so incredibly important that we take a very deliberate, cautious even approach as we're looking at these various tools and that we're able to gauge the quality of the outputs produced by these generative AI tools, that we can check for bias and those sorts of things. So, the research up to this point has been limited, but there has been a decent amount that has shown that, yes, there is implicit bias that makes its way into the training of a lot of these models. And so then when you start using them for hiring decisions or whatever, you have to be very careful. You have to quality check, and you have to make sure that you're not passing along, even if it's unintentional, implicit bias, that it's not getting passed along through the system that you're using. And that can be easier said than done. So just to reiterate what you're saying, like this, we really do need to take a very research informed approach to how we utilize these tools and that we can use them very responsibly. All right. So you alluded to how you're working with so many really great big tech companies, various global corporations, Accenture, Google, IBM, Walmart, many others. They've signed on to this tear the paper ceiling kind of approach, eliminating degree requirements for jobs and instead taking a skills-based approach. What what's your feel around kind of this movement? Like what are the drivers behind this? Why is this picking up so much steam?
Yeah, the paper ceiling, let's first talk about what that term is exactly. I mean, you hit on it, but the paper ceiling is a term that's been coined, pretty recently to describe the fact that a lack of college degree frequently prevents people from
Yeah.
access to well-paying jobs when they actually have the skills and experience to perform those jobs well.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at the US, about 75% of jobs here that pay more than 35,000 a year require a college degree. Yet only about half of US workers actually have a college degree. So there's a really big mismatch here. And the numbers are actually quite staggering when you consider the degree requirements eliminate a huge swath of candidates, probably about 70 to 80 million people. So that's a lot of workers kind of left on the table who could potentially do jobs that companies, need their skills for. So there's kind of two issues here. One is we're denying access to job seekers who have the skills to perform well, and that's unfair to them. But it also does create problems for employers who are facing tight labor markets and having
Right.
difficulty finding the skills they need. Now, a lot of people think with so many recent layoffs at large tech companies, maybe these skills shortages are no longer a problem. But the reality is that they are. About half of companies say that recruiting talent with the right skills remains a major challenge today. And one way we can address this is by digging deeper into the talent pool to identify those workers who actually have the skills to perform, even though they don't have a degree. And one area where this strategy has been tried and is actually working pretty well is in cybersecurity. There's been some hiring programs in that particular domain that have focused on skill assessment rather than degrees that are helping to reduce skills shortages. So this actually works. Couple other points I'll make quickly. There's kind of an irony, which is that many hiring managers actually are looking for college educated workers. But when these people get to the job, they don't actually perform as well as expected. So
Right.
managers end up disappointed, right? Now, why is that happening? And if you think about it, we're actually making assumptions about what skills people have just because they have a college degree, whether we know this or not. You talk about biases, that's a type of bias. It's
Yeah.
one of our assumptions going in. And we also assume that if you have a degree from certain highbrow schools, that you're
Right.
going to be a better performer from somebody who goes to like a state university. Well, there's been research on this, in fact, a lot of it. And the research has shown that these inferences simply don't pan out. College degrees and years of experience are actually very poor predictors of job performance. So when you think about then degrees being a requirement for getting a job, it's kind of crazy. But the reality is that the skills and the concepts that we learn in college aren't always a perfect match for what's needed on a given job. So you have to ask yourself, rather than make assumptions about what skills people have based on them having a degree or where their degree came from, why not just assess people's skills directly that are most critical for the job in question so that you actually know what you're getting before they show
Right.
up? So all of this stuff, including the fact that if you focus on skills, you actually give candidates from more diverse backgrounds a chance to compete for
Hmm.
jobs rather than, based on capabilities rather than having a degree. That also opens up opportunities for them. So I just went through a whole host of reasons,
Yeah.
basically, why there's interest in breaking through the paper ceilings. And as a result of all of these factors, fairness to candidates, lack of skills, employers having problems finding the skills they need, being more fair to candidates, this mismatch between education, and actually good performers on the job. All of those reasons have led to an increased interest in breaking through the paper ceiling. And so we've seen major employers and state governments beginning to drop degree requirements. In 2002, the companies you mentioned, nearly 50 major companies in all, signed on to raise awareness about skills-based hiring and actually initiated efforts to remove their degree requirements. So this is where we're at today. Kind of a long answer, right, John? But there were a lot of things that really led to
Yeah.
this happening.
Yeah, so much there that you shared that I think is so important for everyone to understand. And this is coming from two PhDs. We're both PhDs. We both believe in the power of higher education. I'm a university professor. I think higher education is super important. I'm going to encourage my kids to get college degrees, etc. But all of that said, the reality is I 100% believe in skills-based hiring. I better be preparing students through the college programs that I'm a part of. I better be preparing students with actual skill sets, not just the diploma at the end of the day. And that's definitely goes into how I approach my curriculum and program development and whatnot. But regardless, you set that aside for a second. It's just so silly. Like the way we've built our whole labor market largely on this idea of you need a college degree. And so then we have these arbitrary degree requirements that really people get pigeon. Not only do you need a college degree, but you often get pigeonholed into like whatever specific narrow niche of a college degree you received, even though there may be tons of transferable skills from whatever you studied in your major versus like what you end up doing. So that's a problem. You also have just these arbitrary, like so many employers have these arbitrary years of experience requirements that they also put in job postings, which is similarly stupid because 10 years of bad experience doesn't mean you're a better candidate than someone who has maybe a year of experience but has the skill sets and is hungry and willing to learn, right? I would much rather take that person who is willing to put in the work and learn and has transferable skills, even if it's a career pivot for them and they're moving in a different direction or whatever. So for all these reasons that you just said, it's so important for us to get beyond these biases of like the top tier universities, of even a college degree in the first place. And if we do feel like a college degree is important, that we can really articulate why. What is it about the college degree that is really an indicator of this person being able to perform? Like you said, there's lots of research that often points to the opposite. So we better have a good argument. And then, regardless, we just need to be much better at taking a skills-based approach in our hiring process. It's one of my biggest frustrations professionally is to hear people talk about the recruitment and hiring and onboarding process and how much just inherent bias gets built into that system, in large part because so many people think they have like magical powers of discernment to like just really be able to understand what someone brings to the table. And it's nonsense. We don't have that power. I don't care who you are. You can't ascertain someone's ability to perform in a job after a few seconds in an interview, even though we know that's what research says most people do in terms of how fast they make decisions. And so let's take a step back. Let's perhaps reset and have a better approach to how we approach hiring, right?
Exactly. I love the fact that you brought up the interview because if you look at the research on interviewing in particular, you make a very good point there. If you have a normal manager doing their normal interview thing, the ability of that interview to predict subsequent job performance is really, really low. It's terrible. But when you take a manager and you give that manager a structured set of interview questions that are job relevant, and you train that manager how to ask the questions, and importantly, not just ask the questions, but probe in structured, meaningful ways for job relevant information around those questions, and you give the manager a set of evaluation criteria and train them how to apply it, the interview is one of the most, if not the most predictive assessment that we have. So it's a matter of make sure that you're assessing people on job relevant information, that you're doing it in a standardized, structured way, that people are trained on what bias, because they're even in interviewing, there's lots of biases. Similar to me bias, for example, if you and I went to the same school, we'd immediately might have a liking for each other just
Right.
because we found a common ground, and you'll probably rate me higher. Or I'll say something that's really good in one answer to your question. You'll say, wow, that person really good. Stop listening. And I get high ratings on everything. But we can
Right.
train people how to work around what their own biases are and how to work around them and get more accurate assessments that are better predictive of job performance. And the interview isn't the only assessment we have. You know, we have work samples where we
Yeah.
can put people into simulated work environments, right? We can assess all kinds of capabilities from knowledge areas, personality, basic abilities, and we can do that fairly and without bias. It's just that there is a whole science called industrial and organizational psychology, which you're familiar with, I suspect, that sits behind all of this assessment development. And you got to make sure that you have the right people, the right scientists who are trained in the field developing these assessments, and not just people who are coming up with questions like using AI, for example, who don't really know what the good principles and practices of assessment development are. That's where we run into trouble. So I think people just need to be educated. It's like anything else. You don't want some person off the street training Gen AI how to do surgery. You probably want a very experienced surgeon working along to train the models and to be constantly evaluating them and checking
Right.
them. And well, it's the same thing when it comes to assessment development. You need the experts who know what they're doing to be utilizing the AI to make sure that all of our best practices in assessment development and administration are captured in how Gen AI is applied to developing assessments. And it can be a really powerful tool for doing that, but you can't, that's what I mean by responsibly. And we need to make sure that we can actually use it well before we embed it into our products and start using it broadly. That's at
Yeah.
least the approach that both we and our parent company, Pearson, is taking to, leveraging Gen AI today.
Yeah, you really do need to make sure that you're training people. So interviewing gets a bad rap, and I think for good reason, because so many people are terrible interviewers and they're not
Right.
trained and they don't use a good approach. But there are better approaches to interviewing, so you train
For
people up on
sure.
that. There are good approaches to doing mock assignments, work samples, other forms of assessment for skills-based assessment. There's lots of things that you can do. And, generally speaking, I like in most things in life, I like to take a multi-prong approach. Don't rely on one
Yep.
thing, triangulate, right? And try it so you can come to a better understanding of the issues and come to a better decision. Maybe in the final few minutes we have together, let's talk a little bit more explicitly about the role of AI. What role it's playing in enabling skills-based hiring and maybe new and creative ways that we haven't had the capabilities for in the past.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of potential applications of AI to assessment, and we're looking at kind of all of them, I will say, because we're not quite sure which are going to pan out more or less. But
Yeah.
let's say that we're trying to assess certain technical skills. Well, certainly AI can help generate questions to assess technical skills and response options. So if in a multiple choice kind of format,
Hmm.
can do that. We have algorithm. This is very simple. You score your tests and you rack and stack people, and that's already done in an automated way. So that's
Hmm.
kind of check the box on that one. But this issue of item development is an important one. And we, in fact, just did a study where we pitted human developed items, and these were more knowledge type items, skill type items, and I'll differentiate those from more, let's say, enduring capabilities, which I'll talk about in a minute. But let's just assume we have a knowledge test. So we had GenAI generate items for us, and we had humans generate items. And then we subjected them to a comparison on a number of different criteria. Some of them were psychometric criteria, some of them were human rated criteria, just, what's the clarity of the item and those sorts of things. And in our research, the Gen AI items actually did better than the human generated items. So we're anxious to publish this because we did a pretty rigorous, apples to apples evaluation on it. And I will say, we were a little surprised, maybe a little worried about our jobs, but it does appear that, we can get a lot of help with item development. Our parent company, Pearson, also has a tool called Item Assist that is similarly helping generate test items. Again, it's not in broad use in production yet because we're still doing the research to make sure we can get this all right. In the area of work simulations, I've been amazed, and we've also been experimenting with how easily we can create, very immersive situations that we can put people in that mirror the job. And then they can respond in high fidelity ways to these situations the way that, they would very naturally on a job. And what we know is that work sample assessments like this are one of the best predictors we have of job performance because they actually make you do the job in a little confined snippet. The problem with normally using these is it takes a lot of money and a lot of time to develop these immersive simulations. Well, one of the guys on our AI research team last week got a hold of one new tool that does video, and he put in a few prompts, and before you know it, we had an immersive assessment that looked pretty darn good. Again, scarily good. But the trick there, and I think we need to do a lot more work here, is you have to be careful in how you construct the scenario to elicit certain responses for, let's say, the competencies you're trying to assess. So it can't just be done completely on the fly randomly. But then you also need rating criteria. So what does good look like? What's a really good response? What's a medium response? What's a low response? And getting the full AI Monty, so to speak, you would want all of that to be automatically evaluated, applying the rating criteria consistently, accurately, without bias. So that's a little trickier, right?
Yeah.
And when you're in an immersive job situation, you may also, if you have a simulated role play, for example, you might need someone to probe to get more information. Well, again, what are the right probes that would be different for each person, but would create an equally fair test for everyone who's taking the assessment, right? So this, again, a lot of promise for AI, but I think we need to tread lightly and make sure that the tests we're developing with AI are as good as the ones that we develop as test developers. Now, from what I've seen so far, maybe we can get there, but we're not there yet. So the position we're taking is more research. Let's make sure we're really embedding the best practices, and let's do this responsibly. Because it's so easy to put stuff out now that could be a poor assessment, and then it's no better than using nothing. But I will say, when we're talking about skills-based hiring, because there are so many different skills that you might want to hire for, it is important to be able to have a way to scale that. And I think Gen AI offers the promise of being able to do that, but we need to do it carefully and with the right amount of research behind it. And enough times, we really know what we're doing, and we can stand behind the fairness and the efficacy of the assessments. So I just can't stress the importance of that, because they all look so good. The stuff that AI develops, that you can become, I guess, enamored with that and forget about the fact that it may not work and the research isn't done to prove that it does work the way you need it to.
Yeah, it's a bit of a black box. We need to really unpack it. We need to better understand really what's happening and just to have more confidence in it. But you've explained, I think, really well the value of skills-based hiring and some of the ways that we can leverage a variety of approaches, including leveraging Gen AI to help us to do that more efficiently, to do that more effectively. So I'm really excited to see how things continue to develop in the near future. I mean, things have improved so much just in the last year and a half since ChatGPT was released. Like, my mind boggles to think about like where are we going to be a year from now. We'll see, but the research needs to be done. So I appreciate the work that you're doing there. Elaine, I note the time. I need to let you go here in just a minute, but before we wrap things up, I wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, your team, and then give us the final word on the topic for today.
Yeah, I think, well, for me, probably the best way to connect with me or us is through our website, which is pdri.com. All of the information about our products, services, and what we're doing is really contained there. We're also on LinkedIn, myself, personally, or PDRI. So it's easy to find us through LinkedIn, and those are probably the best ways to contact us. I think, John, the last thing I would say on this topic is I do believe that we can do a great service to workers and to companies by expanding our aperture to do more skills-based hiring. I think it's going to land people in jobs that they're well suited for, and I think it's going to be a better way to actually predict job performance and get people in jobs who can perform well and provide more opportunities to them. But there is a way to do this, and it needs to be done right, both using AI and assessments in general, because if the assessments aren't doing their job, then all of the advantages here really become a moot point. It's not going to work well for companies or people. So that would be my last a little bit on a soapbox, because I've already said that, but it's such an important point to stress. So thank you for letting me do that. And I've really loved being with you today. It's been so much fun, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Elaine. It's been a real pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Elaine and her team can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day.